The moment Jasmine Crockett's words hit the airwaves, Donald Trump's face turned red with fury. The Texas congresswoman had just said something about Melania that crossed every line imaginable, and what happened next sent shockwaves through American politics. Within minutes, Trump was on Truth Social firing off posts that would break the internet, while Crockett sat there with a smirk that said she knew exactly what she had done. This wasn't just another political spat. This was the moment a freshman Democrat decided to go nuclear on live television, targeting the former First Lady in a way that even Trump's harshest critics called too far. But what Crockett said next would prove she wasn't backing down, she was just getting started. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the latest political drama that's reshaping America. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this story unfolds. The CNN studio was buzzing with tension as host Anderson Cooper prepared for what everyone thought would be a routine discussion about immigration policy. Jasmine Crockett, the 43-year-old congresswoman from Texas, sat across from Republican strategist Scott Jennings, her brown blazer crisp and her expression determined. She had been making waves since entering Congress, but nobody expected what was about to happen. The cameras rolled, the red lights flickered on, and within 30 seconds, Crockett would deliver a line that would haunt Trump for weeks and divide the nation down the middle. The stage was set for political warfare, and Melania Trump was about to become the unexpected target in a battle she never saw coming. To understand why what happened next was so explosive, you need to know exactly who Jasmine Crockett is and why her words carried such devastating power. At 43, she's not your typical freshman congresswoman. She's a former public defender from Dallas who built her reputation tearing apart cases in Texas courtrooms before taking that same aggressive energy to Washington, D.C. Crockett made headlines during her first year in Congress for her sharp questioning during committee hearings and her willingness to go toe-to-toe with Republican colleagues who underestimated her. She's young, she's fearless, and she's got nothing to lose. More importantly, she's got a talent for finding the exact words that hit hardest when it matters most. On the other side of this brewing storm sits Donald Trump, a man who spent decades protecting his family's image with the ferocity of a guard dog. Throughout his presidency and beyond, one line he's drawn in the sand is simple: attack him all you want, but leave his family out of it. Melania, Barron, his adult children, they're supposed to be off limits, even in the brutal world of American politics. Melania Trump, the former First Lady, had largely stayed out of the spotlight since leaving the White House. She'd been focused on her son Barron and maintaining her privacy, appearing only occasionally at Trump's side during major events. For most Americans, she represented the non-political side of the Trump family, formally elegant, reserved, and deliberately separate from the daily political warfare. The stakes of this particular CNN appearance couldn't have been higher. It was February 2024, just as the presidential primary season was heating up. Trump was dominating the Republican field, but Democrats were looking for any opening to damage his momentum. Immigration had become the hottest issue in American politics, with both parties trying to prove who could be tougher on border security. Crockett had been invited on CNN specifically to discuss the latest immigration bill working its way through Congress. The topic was supposed to be policy, border wall funding, asylum procedures, deportation protocols. Nobody expected the conversation to take a sharp turn toward personal attacks on the Trump family. But that's exactly what makes Jasmine Crockett so dangerous as a political opponent. She doesn't stick to the script. She doesn't play by the traditional rules of political engagement. And when she sees an opening to land a devastating blow, she takes it without hesitation. The CNN green room had been buzzing with the usual pre-show energy. Producers rushing around with clipboards, makeup artists doing final touch-ups, and guests reviewing their talking points. Crockett sat calmly in her chair, scrolling through her phone with the casual confidence of someone who knew she was about to detonate a political bomb. Scott Jennings, the Republican strategist, sharing the panel, would later tell friends he had no idea what was coming. He'd prepared to defend Trump's immigration policies and attack the Democrats' border proposals. He had no clue he was about to witness one of the most shocking moments in recent political television. Anderson Cooper, veteran of countless political interviews, had seen it all. Presidential scandals, congressional meltdowns, international crises, nothing surprised him anymore. But even he would be caught off guard by what Crockett was about to unleash on his show. The truth is, Crockett had been planning this moment for weeks. She'd watched Trump's polls climb throughout the early primary season, and she'd grown frustrated with what she saw as Democrats playing too nice, too careful, too worried about crossing lines that Trump himself had obliterated years ago. She'd seen Trump attack Gold Star families, mock disabled reporters, and go after the children of his political opponents. In her mind, the time for political niceties was over. If Trump wanted to play dirty, she was ready to show him just how dirty politics could get. The immigration discussion was just going to be her vehicle. She knew that once the cameras were rolling and the conversation got heated, she'd find her moment to strike. And when that moment came, she was going to make sure her words hit Trump exactly where she knew it would hurt the most, through his family. The first 20 minutes of the CNN segment went exactly as everyone expected. Anderson Cooper laid out the immigration debate. Crockett criticized Republican border policies as performative cruelty, and Scott Jennings fired back with statistics about border crossings and drug seizures. It was standard cable news political theater, passionate but predictable. Then Cooper made the decision that would change everything. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, leaning forward slightly, "Republicans argue that Democrats simply don't understand the real-world impact of immigration because you live in safe, wealthy districts removed from border communities. How do you respond to that?" Crockett's eyes flashed. This was exactly the opening she'd been waiting for. "You want to talk about being removed from reality, Anderson?" she said, her voice sharp and rising. "Let's talk about who's really out of touch with immigrant communities in this country." Jennings jumped in, sensing the conversation was about to escalate. "Congresswoman, if you want to discuss immigration policy, let's stick to the facts rather than personal attacks." But Crockett was just warming up. "Personal attacks? Scott, your party nominated a man who called immigrants animals and vermin. Don't lecture me about keeping things civil when your guy threw civility out the window years ago." The tension in the studio was immediately palpable. Camera operators shifted slightly, sensing they might be capturing something significant. Cooper tried to regain control. "Let's focus on the policy proposals currently before Congress." "No, Anderson. Let's focus on the hypocrisy," Crockett interrupted, her Texas accent becoming more pronounced as her voice rose. "We're supposed to pretend like Donald Trump cares about immigrant families when he spent 4 years separating children from their parents? When he called countries in Africa shitholes?" Jennings looked uncomfortable. "Congresswoman, those are old talking points. We're here to discuss current legislation." "Old talking points?" Crockett laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Tell that to the families still separated because of his policies. Tell that to the immigrants who were demonized every single day by his administration." Cooper could see where this was heading and tried one more time to redirect. Both parties have proposed different approaches to immigration reform. But Crockett was on a roll now, and nothing was going to stop her from reaching her target. You know what the real irony is here? Donald Trump spent 4 years attacking immigrants, calling them criminals and rapists, when his own wife. The studio went dead silent. Jennings' face went pale. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze. Cooper's eyes widened as he realized what was about to happen. "Congresswoman," Cooper started, but Crockett was already past the point of no return. His own wife worked illegally in this country before she got her green card. Melania Trump violated immigration law, worked without proper documentation, and then used family connections to bring her parents here through the exact same chain migration policies that Donald Trump spent years attacking. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Jennings sat stunned, his mouth slightly open. Cooper blinked hard, trying to process what had just happened on his show. But Crockett wasn't finished. The floodgates were open now, and years of political frustration came pouring out. So before we sit here and pretend like Trump has any moral authority on immigration, let's remember that his wife violated the exact same laws he wanted to use to deport millions of other people. The only difference? She was a white model who caught the eye of a rich man. Jennings finally found his voice. "Congresswoman, that's completely inappropriate." Mrs. Trump followed all legal procedures. "Did she?" Crockett shot back, her eyes blazing. "Because the reporting shows she worked illegally on tourist visas before getting her work authorization. She did exactly what Trump wanted to deport other people for doing." The CNN control room was in chaos. Producers were frantically checking legal guidelines, wondering if they needed to cut to commercial. Social media was already exploding as clips of Crockett's comments started spreading across Twitter and TikTok. Cooper made one final attempt to regain control. "We should note that Mrs. Trump has not been accused of any criminal wrongdoing." "Of course she hasn't," Crockett replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because she married the right man. Because she was the right color. because she fit the right image. But thousands of other immigrant women who did the exact same thing? They got raids, deportations, and families torn apart. The commercial break couldn't come fast enough. As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, the studio erupted in controlled chaos. Producers rushed over to Crockett, unsure whether to congratulate her or apologize to the viewing audience. Jennings sat shaking his head, muttering about new lows in political discourse. But the damage was done. In less than 3 minutes, Jasmine Crockett had dropped a political nuclear bomb that would dominate news cycles for weeks. She'd taken the immigration debate and turned it into a direct personal attack on Trump's wife, using language and accusations that even Trump's harshest critics had avoided. The question now wasn't whether Trump would respond, it was how explosive that response would be. And as Crockett sat in the CNN green room after the show, scrolling through her phone as notifications poured in, she had the satisfied smile of someone who knew she'd just changed the entire political conversation. Within minutes, Melania Trump was trending on social media. News outlets were scrambling to fact-check Crockett's claims. Republican leaders were issuing statements condemning her comments. And somewhere in Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump was watching the clips and preparing to unleash a response that would shake American politics to its core. The stage was set for a political war unlike anything the country had seen. And Jasmine Crockett had just fired the first shot. The explosion didn't take long. Just 47 minutes after Crockett's CNN appearance ended, Donald Trump's Truth Social account erupted like a volcano. The first post appeared at 9:23 p.m. Eastern Time, and it was clear from the all-caps and rapid-fire posting that Trump was absolutely livid. Nasty Jasmine Crockett just attacked my beautiful wife Melania on fake news CNN. This is a new low even for the radical left Democrats. Melania is the most elegant first lady in history, and these people cannot stand it. But Trump was just getting started. The posts kept coming, each one angrier and more unhinged than the last. Crockett is a failed congresswoman from Texas, who nobody knew until she decided to lie about Melania. She's jealous because she could never be as classy and beautiful as my wife. Total loser. The immigration lies about Melania have been debunked for years. Fake news. Unless this nobody spread conspiracy theories. Where is the FCC? Where are the lawyers? This is defamation. Melania followed every law, every rule, every procedure. She's more American than these radical left lunatics who want to destroy our country. Jasmine Crockett should apologize immediately. The posts kept coming for the next 2 hours. Trump was clearly watching CNN replays and getting angrier with each viewing. But it was his final post of the night that really showed how deeply Crockett's words had cut. Nobody attacks my family and gets away with it. Jasmine Crockett just made the biggest mistake of her pathetic political career. I will never forget this. Meanwhile, back in her Washington apartment, Jasmine Crockett was watching Trump's meltdown with evident satisfaction. She'd achieved exactly what she'd set out to do, get completely under Trump's skin and dominate the news cycle. But more importantly, she'd forced a conversation about immigration hypocrisy that Republicans had been desperately trying to avoid. Her phone was buzzing constantly with calls from Democratic colleagues, some congratulating her for finally taking the gloves off, and others warning her that she'd crossed a dangerous line. House Democratic leadership was reportedly split on how to respond, with some wanting to distance themselves from her comments, while others secretly applauded her willingness to fight fire with fire. But Crockett wasn't backing down. At 11:45 p.m., she posted her own response on Twitter that showed she was ready to keep this fight going. The truth hurts, doesn't it, real Donald Trump? Your wife violated immigration laws, used family connections to gain citizenship, then stood silently while you demonized other immigrants for doing exactly what she did. That's not an attack, that's a fact. The social media explosion was immediate and massive. Number Jasmine Crockett and number Melania Trump were both trending nationwide within hours. News outlets were scrambling to book immigration lawyers to fact-check the claims. Cable news shows were extending their coverage to analyze the fallout. But the real fireworks were happening in the Republican Party. Trump's allies were caught completely off guard by the personal nature of Crockett's attack, and their responses showed just how rattled they were. Senator Lindsey Graham called it the most disgusting attack on a first lady in American history. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, usually careful to avoid defending Trump too strongly, issued a statement calling Crockett's comments beneath the dignity of Congress. Even some moderate Republicans who rarely defended Trump were condemning the personal nature of the attack. The problem for Republicans was that Crockett's core claim was actually true. Melania Trump had worked as a model in the United States while on tourist visas, which technically violated immigration law. She'd later obtained proper work authorization and eventually citizenship, but the timeline raised questions about whether she'd followed all procedures correctly. Trump's camp had always dismissed these issues as minor technicalities, arguing that Melania had corrected any problems and followed proper legal channels. But Crockett had weaponized these old stories and used them to expose what she called the hypocrisy at the heart of Trump's immigration agenda. The next morning brought even more chaos. Trump appeared on Fox and Friends for an unscheduled phone interview, and it was clear he was still seething about Crockett's comments. "She's a nasty woman," Trump said, his voice tight with anger. "Very nasty. And very stupid, by the way. Melania is the most incredible woman, the most incredible first lady we've ever had, and this person, this nobody from Texas, thinks she can attack my wife? Big mistake." But when Fox host Steve Doocy gently pressed Trump on the immigration timeline questions, Trump's response showed just how much Crockett had gotten to him. "It's all fake news, Steve. All of it. Melania did everything perfectly, more perfectly than anyone in history. These people are just jealous because they could never be married to someone as beautiful and elegant as Melania. It's jealousy, pure and simple." The more Trump talked, the more it became clear that Crockett had struck a nerve that went deeper than just political disagreement. She'd attacked not just his wife, but his image of his wife, his pride in his family, and his sense of himself as someone who'd won by marrying a beautiful woman. Democratic strategists were amazed at how effectively Crockett had baited Trump into exactly the kind of emotional response that reminded voters why they'd grown tired of the constant drama. Instead of staying focused on policy issues where Republicans had advantages, Trump was now spending his time defending his wife's immigration history and raging about a freshman congresswoman from Texas. But Crockett wasn't content to let Trump have the last word. On Thursday morning, she appeared on MSNBC's Morning Joe and doubled down on her comments with the confidence of someone who knew she'd already won the battle. "I said what millions of Americans have been thinking for years," she told hosts Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. "If you're going to build a political career on demonizing immigrants, you better make sure your own family followed every single law to the letter." And the evidence suggests that didn't happen. When Scarborough asked if she regretted the personal nature of her attack, Crockett's response was pure political theater. "Joe, Donald Trump called immigrants animals and vermin. He separated children from their parents. He tried to end DACA and deport young people who'd lived here their entire lives. So no, I don't regret pointing out that his wife did exactly what he wanted to punish other people for doing." The interview clips went viral immediately. Crockett had managed to turn Trump's anger into her own political victory, using his emotional response as proof that her criticisms had hit their mark. She'd gone from being a relatively unknown freshman congresswoman to a national political figure in less than 48 hours. By Friday, the story had completely dominated the political news cycle. CNN, Mississippi NBC, and Fox News were all running special segments about the controversy. Late-night comedy shows were having a field day with Trump's explosive social media posts, and political cartoonists were drawing brutal caricatures of Trump defending his wife while attacking immigrant families. The genius of Crockett's strategy was becoming clear. She'd forced Trump into exactly the kind of unforced error that could damage his campaign. Instead of talking about Biden's weaknesses or his own policy proposals, Trump was spending valuable time and political capital defending his family and relitigating old immigration stories. More importantly, she'd shown other Democrats that Trump could still be baited into self-destructive behavior. His posts about Crockett were so angry and personal that they reminded voters of all the reasons they'd grown exhausted by Trump's constant drama and personal attacks. As the weekend approached, it was clear that Jasmine Crockett had won this particular political battle. She'd gotten under Trump's skin, dominated the news cycle, and forced a conversation about immigration hypocrisy that Republicans desperately wanted to avoid. And she'd done it all with just 3 minutes on CNN and the willingness to cross a line that most politicians wouldn't dare approach. The question now was what would come next. Because if there's one thing everyone knew about Donald Trump, it's that he never lets a slight go unanswered. And Jasmine Crockett had just delivered one of the most personal slights of his entire political career. The weekend brought no relief for Trump's fury. If anything, his anger seemed to intensify as the story continued dominating news cycles and social media feeds. By Saturday morning, he'd posted 17 more times about Crockett, each message becoming increasingly unhinged and personal. "Jasmine Crockett is the worst member of Congress in history. She makes AOC look smart. Her district in Texas should be ashamed of themselves for electing such a nasty, lying person. The fake news media loves Crockett because she's willing to lie about Melania. They can't stand that we have the most beautiful first lady ever. Jealousy and hatred. But it was his Sunday morning post that really showed how much this controversy was eating at him. I've been very nice to Jasmine Crockett, but she wants to play dirty. Maybe it's time people learned about her background and the real reason she hates successful people. Many people are saying things. The implicit threat in that last post sent shockwaves through Democratic circles. Within hours, security experts and former Secret Service agents were analyzing the language, with several noting that Trump's phrase, "many people are saying things," was often a precursor to more serious escalation. Cable news legal analysts immediately began discussing whether Trump's post could be interpreted as intimidation of a federal lawmaker. Former FBI counterintelligence agent Peter Strzok appeared on CNN to explain how such language could be seen as an attempt to silence congressional opposition through implied threats. When a former president with millions of followers suggests there are damaging secrets about a sitting congresswoman, that's not political discourse, Strzok said during his CNN appearance. That's intimidation tactics designed to make other Democrats think twice before criticizing him. The post also triggered an immediate response from congressional security officials, who quietly increased protective measures around Crockett without making any public announcements. Capitol Police sources later confirmed they had flagged Trump's social media activity as potentially threatening, though they stopped short of opening a formal investigation. Democratic fundraising groups seized on Trump's threatening tone, sending out emergency fundraising emails with subject lines like, "Trump threatens Jasmine" and "Protect our fighter." The response was immediate and massive, with small-dollar donations pouring in from across the country, as Democratic voters rallied around Crockett in the face of what they saw as Trump's attempt to intimidate her into silence. Trump was clearly preparing to launch his own opposition research against Crockett, trying to find personal ammunition to fire back at her. But Democratic operatives who knew Crockett's background weren't worried. They knew she'd come from modest circumstances, worked her way through law school, and built a reputation as a tough prosecutor who'd never back down from a fight. Meanwhile, the political establishment in Washington was struggling to figure out how to respond to what many were calling the most personal political attack on a first lady in modern history. Traditional political norms suggested that spouses should be off limits, but those norms had been shattered years ago by Trump himself. Republican leaders found themselves in an impossible position. They needed to defend Melania Trump and condemn Crockett's comments. But they also knew that Trump's emotional response was exactly the kind of unforced error that could damage his campaign. Some GOP strategists were privately furious that Trump had taken the bait so completely. "She played him like a fiddle," one anonymous Republican consultant told Politico. Crockett knew exactly what buttons to push, and Trump fell for it completely. Now, instead of talking about Biden's weaknesses, we're relitigating Melania's immigration history and watching Trump have meltdowns on social media. Democratic leadership was equally split on how to handle the situation. Progressive members of the caucus were rallying around Crockett, praising her for finally fighting back against Trump's hypocrisy. But moderate Democrats, especially those in swing districts, were worried about the precedent of attacking political families. House Speaker Mike Johnson called for a formal censure of Crockett, arguing that her comments violated congressional ethics rules about dignified behavior. But Democratic leadership blocked the measure, with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries issuing a statement that perfectly captured the party's dilemma. While we believe political discourse should remain civil, we cannot ignore the hypocrisy of Republicans who remained silent while Donald Trump attacked Gold Star families, mocked disabled reporters, and separated immigrant children from their parents, now claiming to be outraged by factual observations about immigration law compliance. The media analysis was brutal for Trump. CNN's Jake Tapper noted that Trump had completely lost control of the narrative by responding so emotionally to Crockett's comments. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow dedicated an entire segment to analyzing Trump's social media posts, calling them unhinged and deeply concerning. Even Fox News hosts seemed uncomfortable with Trump's response. While they condemned Crockett's comments as inappropriate, several Fox personalities subtly suggested that Trump should have handled the situation with more dignity and focus. "The president needs to stay above this kind of personal back and forth," Fox's Brett Baier said during his Sunday show. "There are real policy differences to discuss without getting into family attacks and Twitter wars." But the most damaging coverage came from late-night television. Saturday Night Live opened with a cold open featuring Trump, played by James Austin Johnson, frantically typing angry social media posts while Melania, Chloe Fineman, tried to calm him down. Donald, just ignore her. The SNL Melania said in an exaggerated accent. She is nobody from Texas. Nobody attacks my wife. The SNL Trump screamed. I will destroy her. I will end her career. I will… Oh wait, she's actually helping her career by making me look crazy, damn it. The sketch went viral immediately, racking up millions of views and becoming one of SNL's most watched political segments of the year. Comedy writers across the country were having a field day with Trump's emotional response, turning his anger into ammunition for jokes that reinforced the narrative that he was too emotionally unstable for the presidency. Meanwhile, Crockett was enjoying her newfound national profile. Democratic fundraising groups reported that she'd raised over $2 million in small-dollar donations in just 4 days, with contributors specifically citing her willingness to take on Trump directly. Speaking requests were pouring in from across the country, and political operatives were already discussing her potential for higher office. But more importantly for Democrats, Crockett had achieved something that party strategists had been trying to do for months. She'd gotten Trump to stop talking about his strengths and start talking about his weaknesses. Instead of focusing on immigration policy where Republicans had polling advantages, the conversation was now about Trump's emotional stability and his family's adherence to the laws he wanted to enforce on others. The immigration debate itself had been completely transformed by Crockett's comments. Suddenly, every discussion about border security included questions about whether the Trump family had followed proper procedures. Democratic surrogates were armed with new talking points about Republican hypocrisy on immigration law. Republican pollster Frank Luntz released data showing that Trump's favorability ratings had dropped 3 points in the week following Crockett's comments, with suburban women showing particular concern about his angry and personal response. The data suggested that Trump's emotional reaction was reminding voters of exactly why they'd grown tired of the constant drama surrounding his presidency. By the following Tuesday, it was clear that Crockett had won this political battle decisively. Trump's continued posting about the controversy was making him look petty and obsessed, while Crockett appeared on morning shows looking calm and confident, repeating her core message about immigration hypocrisy. The broader implications for American politics were significant. Crockett had shown that Trump could still be manipulated into self-destructive behavior, providing a roadmap for other Democrats who wanted to knock him off his talking points. She'd also demonstrated that the old rules about keeping families out of politics were completely dead, killed by Trump himself during his years of personal attacks on political opponents. Most importantly, she'd forced a conversation about the gap between Trump's immigration rhetoric and his family's actual experience with the immigration system. Every time Trump talked about chain migration or illegal immigration, opponents could now point to his wife's history and ask why those rules didn't apply to the Trump family. As the 2-week anniversary of the CNN appearance approached, political analysts were calling it one of the most effective pieces of political theater in recent memory. Crockett had used just 3 minutes of television time to completely dominate a news cycle, raise millions in donations, and damage Trump's carefully crafted image as someone who could stay focused on policy issues. The story wasn't over, of course. Trump was still posting regularly about Crockett, though his messages had become more repetitive and less focused. Republican opposition researchers were still digging into her background, looking for ammunition to fire back, and Democratic strategists were studying her playbook, trying to figure out how to replicate her success with other Trump family members. But for now, Jasmine Crockett had achieved something remarkable in modern American politics. She'd taken on Donald Trump directly, hit him where it hurt most, and emerged victorious from the battle. She'd shown that Trump's emotional volatility was still his greatest weakness, and that the right opponent with the right message could still make him look small, petty, and obsessed with personal grievances rather than public service. The 43-year-old congresswoman from Texas had entered the national political conversation in the most dramatic way possible. And she'd done it by breaking every rule of traditional political discourse. Whether that strategy would work long-term remained to be seen, but for this particular moment, Jasmine Crockett had proven that sometimes the best way to beat Trump was to make him beat himself. International media outlets picked up the story, with the BBC calling it a masterclass in political warfare, and The Guardian describing Crockett as the Democrat who finally fought fire with fire. Foreign policy experts noted that Trump's emotional response to domestic criticism raised questions about his temperament for international negotiations. Late-night hosts continued mining the controversy for material weeks later. Stephen Colbert devoted an entire monologue to reading Trump's social media posts in increasingly dramatic voices, while Jimmy Kimmel created a segment called Trump's Greatest Hits, featuring his angriest responses to Crockett's comments. The ripple effects extended beyond politics into popular culture. TikTok users created dance videos to clips of Crockett's CNN appearance. Memes featuring her facial expressions during the immigration discussion went viral across Instagram and Twitter. Young Democratic activists began wearing T-shirts with Team Jasmine and Truth Hurts printed across the front. Political science professors started using the Crockett-Trump feud as a case study in modern campaign strategy, analyzing how a single television appearance could reshape national political narratives. Georgetown University's political communication program added the CNN segment to their required viewing list for students studying media manipulation and emotional triggers in political discourse. And as political observers watched Trump continue his social media tirades about a freshman congresswoman, one thing became crystal clear. In the attention economy of modern politics, Jasmine Crockett had just become one of the most valuable players in the Democratic Party. She'd shown she could get under Trump's skin, dominate news cycles, and force conversations that Republicans desperately wanted to avoid. The question now wasn't whether other Democrats would follow her playbook. It was whether Trump would ever learn to stop taking the bait. Based on his continued posting about the controversy 3 weeks later, that seemed increasingly unlikely. If you enjoyed watching Jasmine Crockett take down Trump with surgical precision, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss the latest political battles shaping America. Drop a comment below telling us what you think Crockett should target next, because something tells me she's just getting started with her war against Trump's hypocrisy. The 2024 election is heating up, and you won't want to miss a single explosive moment.